Welcome, everybody. I am excited to be here, and it's a great opportunity to share the journey of attorney mediator with all of you. First of all, I just wanted to give a little bit of context before we launch into our panelists. And I'll just introduce them by name, and then I'll let them give their full introductions as part of answering the first question. So we have Ilona Turner and Helen Chen and Armine Baltazar. A mediator is a third-party neutral, so they don't have any skin in the game, and they facilitate communication between parties in a dispute so that they can hopefully reach a mutually satisfactory agreement. And it's a confidential process, and it's voluntary, and it's different from arbitration in that the mediator doesn't decide who's right or wrong or make any decision. And it's a little less formal because usually arbitration involves evidence, the giving of evidence. So you don't need to be an attorney to be a mediator. And actually there's no universal certification or licensing for mediators. But there is typically, mediators have had at least a 40-hour training. So, and there are a lot of different trainings out there, and oftentimes you will be, if you wanted to volunteer at a community mediation center, they would have a training program that you would go through in order to be a volunteer mediator there. Okay, so after that brief overview there, I'll launch into the first question. I'm going to ask Ilona, because you're right there in the box next to me. Could you please introduce yourself and tell us what type of legal job you have right now, and explain the substantive legal work that you do?
Sure. So thanks so much for inviting me. Again, my name is Ilona Turner, and I work at a law firm called the Oppenheimer Investigations Group, and I'm a senior attorney there. I had been, I have my own conflict resolution practice that I have recently folded into the firm. So I do, at the firm, we do mostly workplace and Title IX investigations. So when there's allegations of discrimination or harassment or other kinds of misconduct at work or at school, they'll sometimes hire an outside attorney to come in and interview people and figure out what happened, and then write a report about that. We also do workplace mediation as part of that. And I also do some mediation and arbitration of litigated cases. And I also do a little adjunct teaching.
Thank you. Okay. So Helen, same question for you. Would you like me to repeat it?
No, that's all right.
Okay,
I'm Helen Chen. I've worked as an employment lawyer, mediator, and community educator over the years. And I'm now really working at the intersection of all those areas as a conflict resolution professional. So I am a workplace mediator, I'm a trainer, and also starting to be a conflict management coach as well. So people come to me if they have tensions with colleagues at work, or they're struggling with some difficult issue at work. Sometimes colleagues come in, they've got opposing views about a decision that was made at work, or maybe they're struggling to make a decision together and they're feeling stuck. So what I do is I try to create a more comfortable and a safer environment in which people can come together, talk about what's important to them, understand their issues more deeply, and then engage in creative and collaborative problem solving to resolve their issues together. And I'll talk a little bit about kind of how I got here later. But I think, Fiona, you asked a little bit about kind of the substantive legal work that we do as mediators. And I wanted to touch on that just very quickly, which is, that each of us comes into mediation work with substantive knowledge, wherever that comes from, law or somewhere else. And I was a former employment attorney, and so I bring with me some employment law and regulations knowledge, like content and knowledge that I bring with me. But then also there's kind of practical information, like obstacles that employers face or obstacles that employees face in dealing with conflicts at work. And so that all informs my mediation work as well. And then on top of that, there's some skills that I developed as a law student and also as a lawyer that also get integrated into my conflict resolution practice. So things like identifying issues, analyzing a problem from different angles, drafting contracts, slicing and dicing an issue into components so that I can support parties as they're threading the needle to look for solutions. So there are lots and lots of different skills that I bring to the work that come from my legal background. And then there are actually, I do want to say there are some things I need to unlearn from my lawyerly days. And I would say that that's, you know, kind of this, the kind of, I bring with me sometimes that adversarial background, that tendency to be a bit hypercritical and to like poke holes in things, which are very useful when you're an advocate. But as a mediator, I'm trying to really stay open and connect with the parties and be less judgmental, which, you know, I'm still working on. But those are the things that I'm trying to do as a mediator that's a little bit different from being a lawyer. So I'll stop there.
Thank you. Yeah, it is definitely hard to turn off the attorney in us. Okay, Armine.
Hi, I'm Armine Baltazar. I'm a family law attorney. I have a small firm. It's me and my partner and an assistant who helps both of us. And the subject of family law is what we do. So what that means is people who are getting divorced, or paternity cases, people who have children together but they're not married, and also things like prenuptial agreements or postnuptial agreements, agreements people make once they're married. So that's the subject, you know, all family law. And we used to do litigation, but we no longer do. So now what we do is we act as mediators or as consulting attorneys in a mediation. So somebody might be in a mediation with a neutral third party, but they feel the need to have their own attorney to consult with, to maybe review a contract. So we do that as well, but it's all in the realm of non-litigated work, you know, helping people who are looking for a non-litigated way out. And we also do something called collaborative law, which is a no-court team approach to a divorce or a paternity case in California. I mean, other states too, but it's been around in California for, I think, at least 30 years.
So, Armine, do you kind of have a stable of professionals that you tap to help you in the collaborative practice, like a financial planner or a tax or an accountant or somebody like that?
Yeah, for sure. The collaborative approach is there's a team of professionals. Nobody is actually a mediator in that, but instead, each person has a lawyer. Each person has a mental health professional who's a coach, who helps with custody issues, who helps with language, communication issues, you know, some of the emotional issues that come up. And there's a neutral financial person, and usually there's a child specialist as well. So even though there's no neutral person, there are team members who commit to not going to court. And that's kind of the main thing about collaborative, is that the lawyers who are the collaborative attorneys for those clients sign an agreement that says, I mean, the lawyers and the clients sign it. And it says, if we can't resolve this through non-litigated, you know, meetings that we're going to have, then these lawyers are fired. These lawyers cannot represent us in court. So I'm not acting as a neutral, but it is still a non-litigated way through. And definitely the mindset about it is quite different than in traditional litigation.
Yeah.
It's much more cooperative than adversarial.
And is that mostly done just in a family law practice, the use of collaborative law?
I've heard that it's also being done in employment law, but I'm not so sure. I'm just really aware of it. Family law is where it's, I think it was kind of born in family law, and it's really big in family law. So I realize I think I might not have answered your initial question. So necessarily we work with forensic accountants who can act as financial neutrals, or mental health professionals who will act as the coaches, or the child specialist, who's also referred to as the voice of the child.
Okay, great. So if each of you could briefly summarize your pathway to law school and then on to legal practice. So maybe Helen, would you like to start?
Sure. So after law school, I I had a 2-year Equal Justice Works Fellowship, which is a public interest fellowship. And so the host organization for that was Advancing Justice Asian Law Caucus, which is a civil rights organization in San Francisco. And then after I finished my fellowship, I stayed on at the caucus for another 4 years as a staff attorney. And so while I was there, I represented low-wage and immigrant workers experiencing workplace health and safety issues. And in particular, was trying to represent workers who had been retaliated against because they were speaking up about health and safety. So I did some representation there, some policy advocacy, some community education, but ultimately started to feel a bit burned out. And I felt like the work was not really sustainable for me as much as I passionately support the caucus's work. And also I was ready to have kids and wanted to work part-time. And I didn't think that my job there would be sustainable in a part-time way. And so I jumped over to the UC Berkeley Labor Occupational Health Program, which is a very small organization housed in the School of Public Health. It's almost like its own standalone nonprofit organization. And that group, LOHP, they help employers and employees take action around things like health and safety issues, wage and hour issues, and other issues. And a key area of my work was to translate employment laws and regulations and make it accessible to diverse audiences. So I did a lot of materials development, curriculum development, a ton of training. And I touched on topics like chemical safety or infectious diseases, misclassification, sexual harassment, lots of employment topics. And I ended up staying there for 11 years, really loved my colleagues and that work there, but also kind of wanted to go back and do more law-related work. I wanted to put more of my legal skills to action. And along the way, realized that almost all the work that I'd done up until that point, everything was about conflict. And on the surface, I was dealing with specific issues like chemical hazards or ergonomics, but underneath that was really conflict. And so that's what I really wanted to learn about and understand better. And so I transitioned to a conflict resolution practice. I opened up a mediation practice during the pandemic, not the best time to open a new business, but that's okay. And I had taken mediation in law school, really loved it. I've taken 2 other mediation courses since then, and also volunteered a lot at different organizations, including SEEDS, which is a community group in Berkeley, and also the Congress of Neutrals, which is in the Walnut Creek, Pittsburgh, Pleasant Hill area. And with both those groups, mediated in courthouses to support people who are litigating civil harassment claims and also small claims, and trying to see if there's a way to get them to some sort of agreement. And so I continue to do my work in Contra Costa County, mediating in civil harassment court once a week. And that kind of helps support my practice. It kind of keeps my skills fresh. And it's also some of the most high intensity conflicts that I come across is in those civil harassment claims. So I'll stop there.
Great, thank you. So Ilona, maybe your pathway from law school to practice.
Sure. Similar to Helen, I also started out doing kind of public interest work, civil rights work. My first job out of law school was doing, I worked at a union side labor law firm for a couple of years in New York. Then I moved back to California and spent about 10 years doing LGBT rights work at a couple different nonprofit organizations. And I spent the second half of that was about 6 years as the legal director of an organization called the Transgender Law Center. And, I loved that work. I was very passionate about advocacy, but similar to Helen, got burned out. It was just too intense, and the fighting element of it, of law practice and whether it's litigation or even just, advocacy and sort of a, like a political campaign type of context. I realized that the things that I found the most satisfying was negotiating settlements and finding common ground and getting folks on the other side to see the, wisdom of changing their policies to, be on the right side of the law and do right by their, employees or students or whatever it was. So I left that job sort of without a plan. Initially, it was just like, I think I'm tired of being a lawyer. I think I need to start over, go get a job at Starbucks, walk dogs. Really thought about all those things. But started finding my way towards mediation and took some mediation training classes. I started doing some work, some arbitration as well as mediation. And then I found my way to the workplace and school investigations work as well, which I really think of as a similar kind of pillar of alternative dispute resolution. It's another way that people can resolve problems without having to go to litigation. It's an alternative to the adversarial system. And it's a better fit for me constitutionally, personally. And I really, enjoy all those aspects of my work. I helping improve workplaces, schools, institutions, to improve the climate, make sure that everybody can get along. We spend so much time in, at work or at school, and to have conflict or, even worse things going on, is just so has such a big impact on people's lives. So it's really very satisfying to be able to help smooth out some of those issues and resolve those issues so that people can be productive and happy where they spend most of their time.
Could you just give me a little thumbnail of what, as a workplace investigator, you do as an attorney?
Sure. So I think I mentioned a minute ago, typically that involves, there's sort of two phases to that. There's a bunch of interviewing and reviewing, so let's say somebody has a concern. Let's say they say that a coworker harassed them. I'll interview that person, find out what they say happened. I'll interview other people, other coworkers, find out what they might have observed, talk to the person who the complaint was about, find out what their perspective is, maybe review documents or emails, text messages, see if that sheds light on things, and then to write a report that summarizes what I see. And it is, like Helen was talking about, it requires me, even though I'm not advocating or writing like a legal memo, I'm drawing on my legal knowledge and my employment law knowledge to sort of issue spot and point things out to the client or the institution. Hey, I think you should be looking more closely at this. Then they can use that report. The important thing is that it's being done by somebody external and, without a stake in the matter, just like when we do mediations. So I don't know these people. I've never worked with them. I'm not biased against any of them. Sometimes there's concerns that if many institutions do these kinds of investigations in-house, but sometimes there's a concern that, there might be a bias, or maybe they know, maybe the complaint is against the CEO or against somebody in HR, or somebody's friends with somebody else. So it can be helpful to have somebody come in from the outside, a neutral person, and give the employer or the school a really solid report that tells them, most likely this is what happened. And then that's something that they can rely on to make a decision about what to do about it.
And so if a mediation would be something that the employer would think would be helpful after your investigation, that's not something you can do, though, since you did the investigation?
I have not yet done that. I think that typically they would want to have somebody else do a mediation, but sometimes employers have come in and said, we'd like an investigation, and I've been able to talk them into doing a mediation instead, because really that is, sometimes there's a situation where there's not really a legal violation here. There's not really a policy. The conduct at issue wouldn't really violate any policies, but it's a miscommunication between these two people. It's a personality clash. And then if we can resolve it short of going through the lengthy, process of investigation, that's usually going to work out better for everybody.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. So Armine, what about you? What about your pathway from law school to practice?
Well, I'll have to preface it by saying I'm one of those people who went to law school because she didn't know what to do with her life, after undergrad. So, I went to law school. I don't regret it for a minute because the education was excellent, but I didn't really know what I wanted. So when I first got out, I started working for a New York-based law firm in their corporate finance department. So working on stuff that like SEC regulation type stuff. And I really, honestly, I hated it. I thought it was like, ooh, the job I'm supposed to get, and I got it. And then I hated it. And I thought it meant that in general, I just didn't know what I picked to do with my life. So maybe I should just leave altogether. So I applied to a credential program to get a teaching credential. I got into the program. I was waiting for the fall semester to start. And then some of my friends who were lawyers said, hey, Armina, before you leave the law altogether, why don't you come and do some contract work for me and see if you like this kind of law or that kind of law. And I had some friends that gave me that opportunity, which was really cool. I got to try criminal defense, immigration, personal injury and medical malpractice. And then I had a really close girlfriend who was doing family law. And started working with her too. And then that stuck. So I started working with her, and then eventually we became partners. She's my current partner. We've been together for like 25 years. And so we were doing family law exclusively, but in the traditional sense, no mediation, right? So just the traditional, like, case comes to you, gets filed in court. Yes, sometimes they settle, but the context is all litigation. So you're doing also some litigation, whether it's pretrial or it's the actual trial. And then kind of like what Ilona was talking about, there came a point where it's like, I was just increasingly unhappy. Like it didn't jive with who I was as a person. It was just so adversarial. The whole currency of it was so like you versus me, or even when you're presenting, a brief or writing something, it's so like one-sided and not acknowledging what could be necessarily the whole truth on the other side. It just felt kind of icky. So I occasionally took a mediation case in. I don't even know how they got to me. But then at one point, I deliberately took some mediation trainings. For whatever reason, I had never taken mediation in law school. So I started taking these trainings. And when I did, I realized like, oh my God, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Something about that learning and the idea behind it and what it was trying to accomplish, and that I could use what I had learned legally to try to develop understanding and a solution, as opposed to, and a solution by the court. Although sometimes there's a settlement, sure, but it's after some level of this. The fact that I could try to use what I knew as a lawyer to try to make things a little bit better as opposed to worse was like, wow, okay, this is what I need to be doing. And that's how I finally kind of came to it. But really after years of doing a traditional practice.
And I didn't realize that you had tried so many different areas of law before settling kind of on family law.
And honestly, I think I settled on family law because, well, it's, the personal aspect of it was cool. And also who I was working with. I mean, like, she's one of my best friends. It really makes a difference when if you're going to work with people, it's really awesome when you work with people you love. That's just an aside.
Yeah, that does make a big difference.
Yeah.
For sure. So we'll stay with you because we're kind of into the next question about what aspects of your work do you like most and what do you least enjoy? So you've kind of already talked quite a bit about what you enjoy about it, but are there things that are not and maybe in particular things when you're mediating that you find are not that enjoyable?
Oh, I was thinking mostly of some other stuff because I'm a small shop, right? So I also run the practice. So I rethought, you told me this question was going to come, so I pre-thought about this one.
Well, you go with whatever answer you had prepared. Let's hear it. I'm sure it's good.
I don't like some of the business side of running your own firm, right? Sometimes you do stuff that's like State Farm wants to do a workman's comp audit. Okay, what do I have to provide them? What payroll information? Like that kind of stuff, which is a drag. As a mediator, because I'm a lawyer, when a couple reaches an agreement, I'm also the person who's drafting their judgment. I mean, I'm drafting a lot of the paperwork that starts the case and then the judgment. So filing it, some of the filing stuff that happens with the court is kind of annoying. Stuff gets rejected for little reasons. And then the other thing I was just reminded of today that's really annoying is when you send something out to a client or clients, like this couple, I had sent them a draft of their judgment months ago. I swear months ago. And today I get a ton of comments back with, we need to do this ASAP. We need to have this judgment entered before the end of the year. You know what I mean? That kind of pressure. So, that's not quite fun. In the mediation, I'd say what's really hard is the stuff that I'm still trying to get better at. I mean, it's challenging, right? Like you have so many different kinds of people who are stuck on something. It's really difficult when somebody is really stuck or unwilling to share. And sometimes I'm not sure if it's, I don't enjoy it as much because it makes me nervous because like, okay, how am I going to handle this? What am I going to do? It might just be me, my insecurity, and that will still be the case, my insecurity about what I'm doing with this when it's something that is kind of difficult. But I honestly sort of, I don't know, because the truth is, if they're in a certain place where somebody is, for example, not willing to communicate, it is in the end a voluntary process. Sometimes you do end up having a conversation with people in mediation to revisit, do you think this is the right process for you? So sometimes that happens, and that's no fun, just because I kind of wish they'd all go through mediation and resolve that way, but they don't necessarily.
Helen, what about you?
Well, I love the actual mediating work. I mean, when I'm in front of parties, time flies. I am completely and fully focused on the parties. I'm practically like burning calories, trying to understand what's happening for them, what's going on for them, what's their story. I'm just all in. And I just really love connecting with the parties and helping them feel heard. I think, it's the same as what Armine is saying. People come in and they can be stressed and overwhelmed, unable to cope. And I feel like if there's one thing I can do, it's sit down with this person, with the other person in the room, but really help them feel heard. And so that is a very satisfying thing that I can do. It feels like it's the only thing that I have control over really in a mediation, since I don't tell the parties what to do. I'm just entirely focused on trying to build that understanding, help them feel heard, and that helps lay the foundation for the parties to do problem solving, but I don't have any control over where they end up going. So I find that really satisfying. And then you asked about things that I don't enjoy. It will not be a surprise to Fiona or to Ilona or to Armine that I cannot stand networking. It is just I don't know, it's just like this Achilles heel of mine. In the nonprofit world, whenever I had to do networking or fundraising, it was always under the umbrella of like some broader mission that was much more than just me. And for mediation, for my own practice, it's a little bit harder. I feel like I'm self-promoting. And anyway, I know there are broader issues around the importance of mediation and conflict resolution, all that stuff, but it still feels like I'm promoting me. And so that's a little bit harder for me to get around. And then also just Armine was talking about the business aspect of things. I don't know why, but every time I have to renew my insurance, it feels like the world is going to end, even though it's like the same process every year and it's really not that big a deal. But for whatever reason, it feels like, oh no, it's insurance time. I don't know why.
But that brings up a good point. You do have malpractice insurance coverage for your mediation practice?
Yeah, so I have professional liability insurance. Yeah.
Me
Thank you.
too.
Professional liability would be a better way to say it.
And I discovered that you can do a 2-year contract so that I don't have to do it every year.
I'm sure you jumped on that.
Yeah.
Ilona, how about you? The good and the bad.
Yeah, well, similar to Helen, I think that this field attracts a lot of people with a certain personality type. So I'm, nodding my head a lot as everyone else is talking. Yeah, the chance to work with people one-on-one, and in both the mediations that I do and the investigations that I do, it's a similar feeling, similar satisfaction in when I'm talking to somebody, one-on-one, making them feel heard, really listening to their story. People don't get listened to very much. Most of us go a long time without having somebody who really like locking in and paying attention and reflecting back, what am I saying that's, most important? What feelings are coming up? I think that can be really important, validating, dare I say, healing in some respects. And it just, and I recognize that I'm coming in and talking to people when they're going through something very stressful, again, whether it's a mediation or an investigation. I'm sure people are extremely anxious about what is this process. I'm dealing with this situation that's really stressful. I don't know what's going to happen as a result of this process. I don't know who you are, stranger, and what's going to happen at the end of this. And for some reason, I just find it extremely satisfying to just make that difficult situation as pleasant and, non-threatening and easeful as possible for the person, and maybe even have something good come out of it, again, from that feeling of being able to tell their story and hopefully, move towards resolution or getting something that getting to someplace better at the end. So I find that's what I love, is the working with individuals and in that way, or groups in mediation. The things that I don't like as much, the other big part of my job is writing, and I actually enjoy writing, but sometimes it can be hard to get started or I, like many of us lawyers, I can be a little bit of a perfectionist. So sort of knowing when to stop refining things. That's something I'm continually working on.
Yes, I find myself doing that all the time too. It's really hard to shut that off. I'll switch to you, Helen, and ask you if you could go back in time to your law school self. What words of wisdom or encouragement would you give yourself?
I think one thing that I did a couple of informational interviews with lawyers before I started law school, just maybe 2 or 3 lawyers, just to hear about their careers and see if that's what I wanted to do. And I wish I'd kept that up in law school, to kind of learn about all the different ideas that are out there. And actually, when I quit my job at UC Berkeley, I took time to do informational interviews. I was looking at a whole, broad range of possible careers, and talked with like 40-something people. And I'm not saying you need to do that, but I think keeping that up, I think it's really useful, because one of the people that I did my informational interview with before law school, I ended up doing a clerkship at her organization over the summer. So it's a really good way to network. And like I said, I don't love networking, but this is one way that it felt a little bit easier than kind of like your cocktail type networking. This is just one-on-one, really hearing somebody's story and, being inspired by their career and their pathway and their reflections about where they are. So I wish I had done that during law school, just to kind of learn about all the different possibilities out there.
Yeah.
And also, I should say, for those of you who are interested in reaching out to me, I'm happy to do an informational interview with me, because I gained so much during that time as I was transitioning to the mediation work. And people were so incredibly generous with me. I did so many cold calls, and people were wonderful. And so I definitely want to give that back. So for folks who want to reach out, I'm happy to talk.
Oh, thank you very much. Ilona, I'm going to skip back to you and ask you the same question. So.
Sure. I mean, I was really interested in what Armine was saying earlier about trying out having the chance to try out different practice areas. And I was thinking that would have been really helpful. I mean, I just I knew I was interested in labor law and LGBT rights before I went to law school. And I just kind of stuck with that. And I wonder, in thinking back, would I have, so when I was going to stop doing that, I didn't know what else, I thought, okay, I need to stop being a lawyer. But yes, now I see that, yes, there are a million ways to be a lawyer and use this education and knowledge and experience. So yeah, maybe getting a little bit more exposure to different types of careers, legal careers. And in particular, I certainly didn't know anything about mediation, and I didn't know anything about workplace investigations or Title IX investigations. I didn't know that any of these, I guess I was vaguely familiar with mediation, but I don't remember having any classes offered about it or any exposure to it. And it has been, it's hard to make a career as a mediator right out of law school, but there are lots of opportunities for training and volunteering. So if I could do it over again, I think I would have sought out those opportunities to get trained as a mediator and start volunteering as a mediator, starting in law school. And then I think I would have had my eyes open to possible careers that include a little bit more of that when I was ready for a transition.
Yeah, it's so easy to get kind of pigeonholed. You start your first job out of law school is in a certain area, and if you stay in it the longer you stay there, the harder it is to skip out and try something different.
Yeah, I mean, and it's good to specialize, right? I guess that's how you sort of get to the top of whatever it is you're doing. This sort of like single-minded focus on that area. But yeah, you can really be hurting your own self by not, if you ever don't want to do that, you just won't know what else is out there. You might have enjoyed something else more.
Right. Yeah, and it's kind of hard to make a switch too, because you've invested so much time learning that specialty and perfecting it. So that can also be hard to try something different once you're locked in.
I will say, one conversation I had with somebody when I was telling them that I was leaving my job at Transgender Law Center without a backup plan, just, hey, I'm just really burned out. I was talking to an executive director of another organization who was, I think, maybe around 60. And she said, and I was like 37 or something at the time. And she said, how old are you? And I said, I'm 37. And she said, well, don't worry, you've got at least 3 other careers ahead of you. Something like that, like 3 more career changes. And I was like, oh, wow. Okay.
Like, exhausting.
I felt at the time like, oh my gosh, I'm a total freak. I'm the only person who's ever done this kind of, dramatic transition, but no, people do it all the time. People change paths. And I think people should be open to that. Don't stick with something that's not, bringing you joy, because there's a lot of other options out there that might.
Absolutely. Life's too short to be stuck in that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Armine, did you have anything to add?
I wish I knew myself better at a younger age. Like, I wish I started meditating earlier, or did the kind of stuff that I've done later in life to, like the self-realization or self-development stuff, because when I started doing some of that, it really helped me see what was important to me, because for so long, so much of what I did was determined by, you should do this, or this looks good, or some pressure, either from family or just kind of societally. or my own insecurity. Oh, I got to do this to look. I wonder if I would have reached mediation sooner, if I had done some of that, like, wait a minute, what am I doing? You know what I mean? To come to that kind of sort of life realization. I wish I had done some of that earlier.
Yeah, me too.
So at this point, because I know some of the folks are going to be wrapping things up so they can get to class, do we want to open it up to questions to see if any of the guests have questions for the panelists, or you, Dean Hall? I mean, you have a background in as a research attorney and also as a mediator, so I think she would be a good person to ask questions as well.
Yeah, especially if you're interested in a research attorney role, since that's kind of, we haven't talked about that yet. Hi, Gia.
Hi, guys. So my question is for the panel, or really anyone. I guess I'm still a little bit unclear because it was said at the beginning that a law degree is not required to become a mediator, right? There are mediators that are not lawyers. So could you help me understand the distinction, I guess, why somebody would want their mediator to also be a lawyer, and what distinguishes you, and why would someone want you versus a non-lawyer mediator? If you could just make that a little more clear.
Good question. Who'd like to take it? Armine?
I'm fine taking it. Anybody can mediate, right? Because two people come to you and you talk about the issue and you try to resolve it. As if you're a lawyer in the field that you're mediating, I'll just give you my example. Because I'm a lawyer, when I have a couple who are getting a divorce, for example, and they want to know, well, what would child support be in this circumstance? What is the law around that? Now, I cannot give either of them advice that's specific to them, but I can tell them what the law is, right? Somebody, if you're not a lawyer, you can't give that legal information, or you can't be like practicing without a license, right? So I can give them general legal information, explain what the law is in California, run the child support calculator if they want to get an idea. And the other thing I can do is I can draft the judgment for them. You know, I can draft some of the legal paperwork for them that if you're not a lawyer, you can't do unless there's something else in California called being a legal document preparer. You can also do that. But some people in mediation, your mediation cannot reference the law at all. You can never talk about mediation, but about the law. But a lot of people want to at least know what the applicable law is. So when you're mediating with somebody who's a lawyer, that's an added benefit, that information can also be shared. That's kind of my experience.
I think a lot of attorneys who have clients and they're going to go to mediation, they want to choose a mediator who's an attorney who knows the area of law that the dispute involves, because a lot of times those mediators will have the parties in separate rooms, and the mediator will shuttle between the two rooms and will kind of do a neutral evaluation of the case for each party and try to generate leverage. And I'm not saying that this is how I would do it, but that is actually pretty typical to be doing it that way. And so that attorney has some gravitas because they can say, well, look, you know, what I've seen in cases like this personal injury case or whatever, the judge is not going to be convinced that, you know, you deserve this much in damages, for instance. So they bring that to the table, and oftentimes retired judges are chosen for that because they have seen so many of these cases, and so they have a broad experience about how things will turn out. So, welcome. Any other questions?
I mean, I could talk to you ladies all night, if I'm honest. I have a billion questions, but I don't want to dominate this little chat. We have like 10 minutes left or something. But I would just love to hear more about the because I already know, and I'm not actually in law school yet. I just came upon this panel as I was researching Empire College of Law, and then obviously found Monterey College of Law, and don't even totally understand the connection, but I will, because I'm coming down on November 7th. But
Great.
before then, wanted to hop on because I already know that it would be very hard for me to like be so intentionally biased. And I'm much more a type of person that would rather determine sort of the truth. I have to do air quotes because whose truth, right? But I already know that I would love to see all sides and help people find the best way to resolve it. So thank you all for being here. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Well, great, and good luck on your journey. I hope it includes law school and then goes on to mediation too.
Yeah, this aspect of the term collaborative law is just so interesting to me, and seems like, I mean, it just seems like something that could really change the entire world in the way that we approach conflict. So that's super interesting to me. I wonder if the panelists could also speak a little bit about, like, it does sound like you really need to have some skills, some psychology skills, and I heard you guys talk about self-awareness being helpful in this role. I'm wondering, as an undergrad, is there a specific emphasis that you think would have been extra helpful as a mediator to kind of have an underlying knowledge of? Like, would it be psychology, or would it be, I don't know, what would it be? That was my question.
I think psychology would definitely be good. I was a sociology major, so for undergrad, and that also helps, but that probably helps more with the lawyer side of things. But I think any of those areas of learning where you're focused more on I don't know, the bigger picture, and how people are thinking and feeling, because that's really in mediation, at least the type. And I guess I should have asked you panelists, kind of what your mediation method is, because there are different ways to mediate. Like I mentioned, there's the going back and forth between the rooms where the parties are never really together, or there's Helen and Armine, I know that you use this, and I'm not sure, Ilona, if you do, but the understanding-based model where the parties are always together. You never have them separated, or that was very rare. So I don't know if you wanted to add anything about that, panelists.
I do use the understanding-based model, but I don't have to have my parties in joint sessions. If they choose caucusing, I do sometimes do that as well. It's very limited, so I use it, cautiously and sparingly. But yeah, I'm not an evaluative mediator. I don't have that background or interest around evaluating parties' cases and whether or not they're strong or weak or whatever. I'm primarily focused on the parties trying to take responsibility for their conflict and trying to resolve that together.
Ilona, what about you?
Yeah, I do a little bit of both. If I'm doing a litigated case, I will defer to the lawyers. Most lawyers will insist on spending most of the time in caucuses. And, while I see a lot of benefits to spending time in joint session together, I will go along with it. I'm not going to force them to. I'm not really in a position to force them to. And when I'm doing like a workplace mediation or community mediation of various other types, I will have a conversation with each party beforehand, separately before meeting together. And I think Matthew has a question.
Sorry, Ilona. Fiona, I know we had that question pending, but Matthew had a question earlier and he's got to go pretty soon. So I'm wondering
yes,
if we can
please.
squeeze that in before he has to leave.
Hello, my name is Matthew. I attend Slow College of Law. I'm in my third year of law school. And from all of your experiences, thank you for sharing your knowledge. My question to you is, when you were in law school and you probably understood that those books were really thick and you're going through all the reading, you're trying to get all the substantive materials, what is anything, words or inspiration that you can give to someone who's almost there, but is just getting a little bit tired, but knows he can finish? Is there anything that you could recommend to someone who has 5 weeks left before he has to hit his midterms for constitutional law, business law, or community property?
5 weeks, there's nothing you can't take for 5 weeks. Come on now. Like, it's not like crap, just gotta do it, just gotta push through. Not very inspiring, Matthew, but all that came to mind right now.
Why did you choose to go to law school, Matthew?
Honestly, not just because I was born into it, but just because I really want to help people. That's just been a goal, It's not about it's not about the money. It's just honestly helping someone who doesn't know their rights so you can help them, so you can help them so they can feel like they have a sense of security. Because a lot of people don't know their rights and they're just getting taken advantage of and they don't know the rules and everything. And it's like, whoa, you can do this, but just going through law school and just going through, I feel like that's motivation right there. I mean, that's one good point. I can use that, I'm gonna help people once I get out of this law school and I can use it to help people. That is something to look at. Yeah.
Yep, for sure. You've got to find something to remind yourself of like why you were there and what your goal is. Because it's a long haul. It is, as we say, a marathon. But I certainly think it is worthwhile. And I'm really excited to hear that you're almost done there. That's exciting.
Well, I appreciate hearing all your feedback and everything about exploring careers. That is really awesome. And you know what? I might send an email and reach out to one of you and ask some more questions and see where my road may take me. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. Okay, so were there any other questions? Am I missing anything in chat?
I have a question. My
Okay,
name
Cora.
is Cora. I'm actually considering a career change. I have my background is in engineering. I already have a master's degree in technology, but I just never felt satisfied with the work that I'm doing, and I'm considering law kind of in the same line as Matthew, because I just feel like I love helping people. I've been in situations where I felt like I was treated the way that I was treated because I didn't know my rights. I guess my question is, what kind of advice would you give someone like me? I feel like I've been in school. I've done schooling for over 7 years, and the idea of thinking, going back again for another 3 or 4 years is a little intimidating to me. What kind of advice would you give someone like me? And then the other question is around what scares me a little bit about law school. It's because English is not my first language. And the reason why I went into science, I was very good with science, but it's not that I mind reading, but it's not something that I really enjoy doing a whole lot. So I just want to get some feedback.
I have a similar background in that I did my undergraduate in environmental science and policy and engineering. And then I have my master's actually in the energy and resources group, which is also kind of a more technical degree. And then thought about going to law school. I actually worked for a little bit and then went to law school. And I guess for me, it was the question of, is law school really worth it? Knowing that there are a lot of very unhappy lawyers out there. And a lot of people who, finish law school, kind of like what Armine was describing, and Ilona too, that somehow you reach a point where you wonder whether or not you picked the right thing. And law school is expensive. It takes a lot of time and resources. And so I think doing informational interviews to talk with as many people as you can is really helpful, because it gives you a sense of can you see yourself along one of these pathways, or is there some combination of pathways that makes sense for you? And then also, are there things that you can do to kind of test out whether or not something law or law related is useful to you? Is there like kind of like an internship that you can do while you're working at a full-time job? Is there some volunteer work that you can do that's law related that gives you some exposure, so that you're not all into law school, because it is a long slog? And you heard, from Matthew, he's like almost at the end, and good for him, but it's tough. It's tough and also very expensive. And so if you can think about, are there things that you can do to kind of test out whether it's a right choice for you? So that's what kind of initially what I would say.
And I'll add there are tons of mediation training programs, groups like Seeds, that's based in the East Bay in California, but they do all their training is online these days. So like several times a year, they'll have a 40-hour mediation training, entirely virtual. You can get trained and then you can start volunteering as a mediator for their cases. And it's not exactly it's not like there's lawyers involved in these mediations usually, but it's exposure to different types of conflicts. Sometimes it's family law, sometimes it's neighbors with a kind of property dispute. It's close to legal practice, and might be an interesting way to both get some exposure to mediation and a little taste of what it might be like to be a lawyer.
Dina, are there informational sessions, or are there opportunities for somebody like Cora? She could like watch a class or talk to the law students and see what their experience has been like?
So yes, so there are opportunities to observe a class, whether mostly closer to if you're in one of our areas where there's a physical campus. Hybrid's a little, our virtual classes are a little bit more challenging to set up the observations. And then we do have information sessions that we had a virtual one last week, and we're hitting the campuses this week and next week, and Empire, I think November 7th, if I'm remembering correctly. So there's also opportunities to come to campus and to tour a campus and talk to students as well. So at this point, we're closing in on our hour, and to wrap it up, so I would just want to thank our panelists. Thank you so much for sharing your stories and your background, and thank you, Dean Hall, for facilitating and moderating this discussion. As I mentioned earlier, this is recorded and will be on our YouTube page, so you're always welcome to circle back and watch it again. But again, thank you all so very much. I appreciate your time, and everyone have a good night.